You feel replaceable. Not because anyone said it, but because everything is measured. Your output, your speed, your performance, your numbers. Somewhere, there is always a metric. And when your value becomes a number, it starts to feel negotiable. You begin to think in comparisons. Am I doing enough? Am I still needed? Would anyone notice if I stopped? But what if that sense of being replaceable is not insecurity? What if it is what happens when human worth gets filtered through constant evaluation? You already know the feeling, even if you never named it. You do something that used to feel like a real contribution, and then you watch it get turned into a number. The number gets compared. The comparison becomes a ranking. The ranking becomes a decision, and the decision feels clean, objective, and final. That is the discomfort. When everything is measured, you start to feel like you are not being understood. You are being processed. Not seen as a full person with context, but as a set of outputs that can be sorted. If your work becomes a dashboard, your body becomes a graph, your social life becomes engagement, and your personality becomes brand, then your value starts to feel like something that can be updated, optimized, or replaced. This is not the same as being criticized. Criticism still treats you like a human being with intentions. Measurement treats you like a system that produces results. And once you are measured like a system, you start to relate to yourself like one. You notice it in small moments. You send an email, then reread it through the eyes of someone who scores you. You complete a task, then immediately wonder how it will show up in the performance review. You post something online, then check it too soon, not because you care what strangers think, but because the numbers feel like a report card. You keep a health streak, not because you feel better, but because breaking the streak feels like becoming the kind of person who breaks streaks. At first, measurement feels like clarity. It promises fairness. It promises feedback. It promises progress, but then it begins to replace judgment with calculation. And calculation does something to the mind that most people do not notice until it is already shaping their daily behavior. You start living for signals. A signal is not the thing itself. A signal is what stands in for the thing. A rating stands in for quality. A follower count stands in for respect. A response time stands in for reliability. A productivity metric stands in for competence. A standardized score stands in for intelligence. A customer review stands in for trust. Signals are useful. They help large systems make decisions quickly. But the mind is not designed to live under constant signaling. The mind reads signals as social information, and social information is not neutral. It triggers comparison. You walk into work, and you can feel the invisible scoreboard. You do not need anyone to mention it. You can sense it in what gets praised, what gets ignored, what gets remembered. You notice who gets invited into certain meetings. You notice who gets quick replies. You notice who gets described as high potential. You start tracking your own position, not officially, but privately. You open a platform and see that your post did worse than the last one. Nothing catastrophic happened, but the mind converts it into meaning. It feels like a reduction in status. It feels like a sign that your attention is fading. And when attention becomes measurable, it starts to behave like a scarce resource that can be lost. You work hard and still feel replaceable because the measurement does not capture what you actually did. You handled a tense conversation. You prevented a problem. You carried a messy situation that never became visible. But the system rewards what can be counted, not what can be understood. So you adapt. You choose tasks that show up. You choose work that is legible. You choose what produces clean outcomes. You stop doing the quiet things that keep everything from breaking. You stop taking risks that might lower your numbers. You stop experimenting in ways that cannot be defended on paper. And then a strange reversal happens. You become more successful by the system's definition, but you feel less real. That is the first cognitive reframe. The feeling of being replaceable is not a personality flaw. It is a patterned response to living inside measurement. When a measure becomes a target, the target changes the behavior. This is a known effect in economics and social systems. The moment a number becomes a goal, people stop using it as information and start using it as strategy. The measure stops reflecting reality and starts shaping it. This creates an open loop in your mind. Because if the numbers are what count, then you cannot relax after doing good work. You can only relax after the number proves it. So your internal sense of enough gets outsourced. Mechanism layer 1 is simple but brutal. Measurement shifts your motivation from internal to external. When motivation is internal, you can feel competence directly. You learn. You improve. You understand what you did well and what you did poorly. The satisfaction is connected to the process. When motivation becomes external, your brain treats the environment like the judge. It waits for the score. This changes how effort feels. Effort becomes a bet. You spend time and attention, then you wait to see if you get a return. If the return is low, the effort starts to feel wasted, even if you learned something, even if you helped someone, even if you made something sturdy. External scoring also changes your relationship with mistakes. A mistake is no longer part of learning. It becomes a threat to your ranking. So you try to avoid visible errors. You try to look consistent. You try to protect your metrics. And that is where replaceability enters. If the system values consistency in the numbers, then anyone who can produce similar numbers can take your place. The deeper parts of you, judgment, care, taste, timing, start to feel irrelevant because they do not translate cleanly. But this is still not the deepest layer. Reflective anchor, you are not tired for no reason. Identity reversal. The pressure is not proof that you are weak. It is proof that the environment is designed to convert people into outputs. Hidden layer T's. The most controlling part of measurement is not the score. It is what the score trains you to believe about yourself. Immediate escalation. The longer you live under metrics, the more your mind begins to speak in the language of the system, even when no one is watching. Mechanism layer 2 is where the feeling becomes persistent. Measurement does not just evaluate you. It builds a model of you. A model is a simplified version of something complex. Systems build models because they cannot handle full reality. A workplace model might reduce performance to a few categories. A platform model might reduce you to engagement patterns. A health app might reduce your body to steps, sleep, and calories. These models are not evil. They are limited, but once a model exists, it starts shaping opportunities. You get recommended, promoted, scheduled, filtered, or ignored based on what the model thinks you are. And then you start cooperating with the model. You learn what the model rewards. You learn which behaviors get recognized. You learn which parts of you are invisible to it. Slowly, you stop expressing the invisible parts. You stop investing in what the model cannot detect. This is why common attempts to fix the feeling fail. People try to work harder, hoping that more effort will translate into more security. But harder work often just produces more measurable output, which raises expectations and tightens the comparison. People try to become indispensable by taking on more, but in a measured environment, taking on more becomes a new baseline. The system does not see sacrifice as depth. It sees it as capacity. People try to build confidence through positive self-talk. That fails because the anxiety is not a mood problem. It is a signal problem. When your social environment runs on scores, your nervous system treats scores as survival information. The result is a quiet kind of hypervigilance, not panic. Monitoring, checking, adjusting, calibrating. And you can feel it even in ordinary life. You choose restaurants based on ratings you do not fully trust, and still feel uneasy picking something unrated. You watch a video, and feel the pull of the view count, as if it is proof of quality. You hesitate to read a book that is not widely praised because you do not want to waste time. Even your leisure becomes measured by optimization. Perspective expansion makes the structure clearer. Modern environments scale by standardizing. Standardizing requires measurement. Measurement requires comparison. Comparison requires rankings. Rankings create incentives. Incentives reshape behavior. This is not limited to work. It appears in education through testing, in health through tracking, in social life through visible popularity metrics, in entertainment through charts and numbers, and in everyday products through constant reviews. When everything is compared, uniqueness becomes hard to recognize. Not because it disappears, but because it does not fit neatly into a shared scoring system. And when recognition becomes scarce, people begin chasing legibility instead of substance. That is why the feeling of replaceability is so common, even among competent people. Competence is not the question. The question is whether your competence is visible in the system's chosen language. Final reframe: the pain is not that you are replaceable. The pain is that you are being asked to prove you are not, using tools that were never built to understand you. The mind responds by compressing itself. It becomes more predictable, more defensible, more measurable. You become easier to evaluate. And ironically, that makes you easier to substitute. Replaceability is not always a fact. It is often a perception produced by a measurement regime. The regime teaches you to locate your worth outside your own experience, inside numbers that flatten context. Controlled closing. In a measured world, the strongest psychological shift is subtle. You stop asking, "Am I good?" and start asking, "Do I look good in the system?" The first question is human. The second is administrative. When you feel replaceable, you are noticing a real structural pressure, the pressure to convert a living person into a clean signal. The more your environment runs on signals, the more you will feel that pressure as a personal verdict. But it is not a verdict. It is the shape of the machine. And the strange part is this: the machine does not need to insult you to reduce you. It only needs to measure you often enough that you begin doing the reduction yourself.